Hey everyone, welcome back to Story Time in the Bakery. It's been a little while since my first Storytime episode back in November, but the holidays rolled in and here we are already into December. But I thought what better time to throw on a Storytime video for you all. I don't know, maybe while you're holiday baking or driving or just relaxing. These are audible videos, and as promised in the last one, I'm starting at the beginning. Actually, slightly before the beginning of my decade-long bakery escapade, since I think a small backstory of what I was doing before I bought my bakery in 2005 is in order. So some of you know that I graduated from the Culinary Institute of America way back in 1997, and pretty quickly got my first job as a pastry chef at a catering company in Princeton, New Jersey. This, quite honestly, was my most wonderful job experience, even more so than owning my actual bakery. I was hired on as a pastry cook, which is basically an entry-level position in a bakery kitchen. This was a gigantic catering business that had been established, I want to say all the way from like back in the 80s. And so this catering company not only dominated the catering market all over the South Jersey, Princeton area, but they also had a bistro restaurant and a small, quaint coffee shop, which is actually where it all began for them. So very soon into my employment there, the head pastry chef was going to be leaving on maternity, and she made it very clear that she had no intentions of coming back after she had her baby. So this was a clear sign for me that I had to approach the owners to get that position before they hired someone else. Ultimately, though, they did hire outside of the company, and soon after, though, that turned into a disaster, and it only strengthened my argument as to why I was the perfect fit to become the next executive pastry chef for this company. So long story short, I was eventually promoted, and then for the next 8 years, I ran the pastry department of the commissary kitchen, which supplied everything from breakfast pastries to wedding cakes and everything in between, to all the catered events each and every weekend, and actually throughout the week to corporate catering, sometimes with more than 500 guests, as well as the daily plated dessert components for the restaurant, for lunches and dinners, and then of course everything to stock the coffee shop, display cases with fresh pastries and cakes every single day. I had a staff that ranged from 4 people to maybe 10, depending on the time of year. And well, working there is and always has been my most endearing memories of all my entire career as a pastry chef. But by around 2004, I was starting to get the itch. If you have read my ebook, Gretchen's Bakery Guide to Owning a Bakery, I explain all about that itch and my subsequent quest to scratch it by ultimately buying my own bakery. But yeah, I was by that time really wanting to fulfill my lifetime goal of owning my own business. So real quick, there's a little known fact about me. I'm sort of someone who jumps without looking where I'm going to land. I've always considered myself a risk taker. And if anyone's familiar with tarot, my spirit card is the Fool card. Basically smiling ear to ear, looking up at the sky at all my dreams and desires while I'm literally stepping off a cliff. So yeah, that's kind of a good description of me throughout my life with so many different things, but hey, I gotta be me. So off I went to start my own business. I gave notice at my job, and there I went. No savings, no business plan, just my stupid smiling face and my fingers crossed as I stepped off the cliff. Okay, so I can't say that I didn't have any plan, since my uncle was the president of a local firehouse, and so because of him, I was able to use the firehouse kitchen during certain times to essentially start up my business. I got business cards printed and I named my business Angel Cakes because I think I felt like that's really all I had, was an angel's prayer for guidance and luck into this new chapter of my life. So I was in there for, I want to say, close to a year. And during that time, though, I had to resort back to working at the diner as a waitress to pay my bills as I tried to launch this business off the ground. So I would work the morning shift at the diner, and then I would head over to the Firehouse Kitchen at night to bake and bake and bake all my samples to hit the pavement whenever possible, toting my samples of all my cakes. So basically my intention was to become a supplier of high-end cakes and pastries for restaurants and catering companies, like those types of businesses that maybe didn't have a large enough operation to have a full-time pastry chef on board. And I knew that there were quite a lot of those places local to me, and many of them were buying frozen cakes and pastries from big distributors. And I thought naturally they'd want to buy fresh and higher quality desserts from me. Like, this was a no-brainer. I was surely to succeed. Remember the Fool card? Yeah. So I learned really quickly that in business, the bottom line is the bottom line. And I just couldn't compete with a $15 frozen cheesecake from Cisco. Like, these places that I went to, they all loved my samples and said that everything was so delicious, but they were paying $15 for a frozen cheesecake. Like, why would they want to spend more money when what they were already doing was already working? However, there was one person who gave me a chance, and it was a small catering company. It was a woman owner, and she started this business herself, I want to say probably when she was my age. And I'm convinced that she saw so much of herself in me, which is probably why she decided to give me a chance. And she hired me for a wedding where I made the wedding cake and 100 cupcakes to go along. I'll never forget it. It was a vineyard wedding, and the theme was wine and grapes, and how could I forget hand piping all of those grapes onto each and every cupcake with a wedding cake to match. I was just so thrilled and excited to get my first gig, but I was also exhausted because don't forget, I was working at the diner every day at the same time. But if there is one thing I am, it's determined. And I also had my youth on my side. I don't even think I was 30 yet. Actually, let me see. Yeah, I just did the math. I was 31 back in 2004. So yeah, total youth energy and excitement, and I was able to pull those really round-the-clock hours. So my first wedding gig went great. She didn't have a single complaint. She said everyone loved everything. Although I don't really recall doing much else for her after that. My memory is a bit vague, but also at that time I was realizing that this was merely going to be a side hustle. Like, if I ever wanted this to be a full-time business, I was going to need way more clients and probably 4 of me to do all of the work. So I set out to write a business plan. My second most favorite thing to do next to baking was writing business plans. I love doing it so much that I sometimes even did it when I had no real plan in mind. Like, I actually wrote a couple of business plans just for fun because that's how much I loved writing business plans. This one, though, was for real, and I was planning to take this to a bank or an investor to get myself into business. I mean, I really just wanted this to be a full-blown, full-time gig. So my location for this bakery business plan was in a small town in New Jersey, like close to where I grew up, with an upper middle class demographic. And actually by this time, a coworker and a very good friend of mine that I'd known for all the years that I was working at the catering company, he also worked there. And he was on board with wanting to go into business with me. So with my finished business plan, we happened to hear of a retired baker. Like, this is just like this weird random, like, there was this retired baker from my hometown who was very savvy in business, and I want to say at that time he was probably close to 70 years old, but most likely bored and itching to get back into the bakery business like all of those old timers. Like they could just never leave the bakery. So on some level, I think his interest in me was piqued and he wanted to hear all about this business plan. But he basically decided after looking into it and reading through it that to do a startup bakery in the town that I picked with no money of my own to put into it just would have been really too risky of an investment. And as they say in Shark Tank, I'm out. So I then took it to one more rich guy that I knew, and he also said that it was just too risky. I think the entire business plan investment was upwards of like $180,000. I mean, but that's with all the equipment, the opening inventory, the rents and the furnishings, and just all the hundreds of things that you don't always think of, but would be required to have to open up in a space. Not to mention have enough money to float it for a couple of years at least while you build up a clientele. So just not a good investment, and I understood that sadly but clearly. But don't worry, my dreams were not snuffed out for long. The owner of the diner that I was still working at since I was like 15 years old found a bakery for sale listed in the newspaper. Yep, in those days, people listed things for sale and jobs for hire in the actual daily newspaper. Well, he showed it to me and said, "You need to go look at this," which my friend from the catering company and I did go together to check it out. So looking back on that day now, there's so many red flags that I should have recognized, but I didn't. I had cupcakes and sprinkles in my eyes, and all I could see was what I wanted to see. And basically that was me prancing around in my own bakery like I had been envisioning ever since I was young. So we got up to the bakery around 3 or 4 on a weekday, and in the afternoon. And this is an off time of the day for any bakery, which is obviously why he had us come to see it at that time. And also he did not tell his staff that he was trying to sell his bakery, which is understandable. He didn't want anybody to go into panic or, get anyone to think that they might lose their jobs or whatever. So he just kind of wanted to keep it on the QT. So even though his entire kitchen staff was gone for the day and essentially he was the only one there, I remember he never turned the lights on in the kitchen area. So only the light from the back door of the kitchen and then the front of the bakery shining into the kitchen from both ends was illuminating the kitchen. And oddly, not I or my friend ever questioned this. Like, why didn't we say, dude, can you turn the lights on? We never even said that. He basically showed us around by the light of day coming in through the back and the front doors, and then mostly kept us in the front of the bakery, like the store part, which was still open for business at that time. So he did show us his books, maybe not on the first visit, maybe on the second time that we went back. Honestly, a lot of this stuff is a little bit foggy to me, but he did show us his books to prove that the business was worth the $110,000 that he was asking for it. And I also remember looking at every cake and pastry in the display cases, just daydreaming of everything that I would change, what I would make better, what I would get rid of. So in my mind, I was already the owner of that bakery. One other thing I do remember clearly is that my friend and soon-to-be business partner and I, after we left, we stayed in the parking lot in the car for about an hour, just watching how many people went in and what they left with, and did they have a tiny bag or a cake box, and we basically thought we were doing our due diligence on the business purchase. Look, we knew nothing about buying a bakery. So we did have the wherewithal, though, to go to an accountant as we got more serious about really wanting to buy this business. And we discussed the impending purchase. And I'll never forget what my accountant said. He said, "You just have to be careful that you're not buying yourself a job." Meaning, does this look like you're both going to make a decent living here? I mean, if you're only going to make like $400 or $500 a week each, you could do that where you were before, or at any random job for that matter, and without all the headache of owning the business. Not to mention, we were going to be putting ourselves into major debt to come up with that $110,000. But even still, $110,000 for an existing business that already had goodwill, it already had customers coming in every day, like it was already making money, that is a way better deal than, spending close to $200,000 with not one single customer, at least not right off the bat. So what I probably should mention here is that this type of a business sale or purchase, depending on which end you're on, is called a turnkey business, meaning that everything about this business was staying the same, except the new owners. So essentially, when the deal was done, we would go to work as the new owners and walk into a business that was already running as usual. The employees were to stay, all the inner workings would keep on working as they were. And I actually went in there again one night, like as we got closer to knowing we were going to buy this bakery, like around midnight, so that I could do some real due diligence to see exactly how the place was running on a real-time scenario. And I believe at that time he still hadn't told anyone that he was selling because the deal wasn't final. But of course, once I showed up at midnight, I think everyone had their suspicions, but I believe he told everyone that he was just looking to hire a manager and that's who I was going to be, or something to explain why I was there looking at everyone working at midnight. It was awkward, to say the least. And well, long story long, obviously, we ended up buying the bakery, and on April 5th, 2005, we were the proud and very scared owners of Woodland Bakery in Chatham, New Jersey. We signed the deal, we got the keys, and then we just prepared to go into work the next day. And then on April 6th at 4 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. Hello? Hello, Miss Gretchen? Yeah, who's this? This is the baker. The oven is broken. What should I do? And so set the tone for my next 10 years as the owner of my very own bakery. All right, let me end this one here, and we will pick it up in the next one. Believe me, it only gets better from here, and by better, I mean worse, so stay tuned. If you are liking this Storytime Bakery series, leave a comment below. Let me know. Be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss a thing. And of course, for all the best vegan bakery recipes, head to my website at gretchensveganbakery.com. All right, everyone, catch you in the next one. And until then, happy vegan baking. Bye for now.